Good evening, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. We are live.
Hello, hello. How are you, Happa?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Seven?
I'm doing well. Doing well. Wish we could have done this on Tuesday, but I felt like hot garbage.
Look,
But
man.
today I feel pretty good. Today I feel pretty good.
All the
This is what
stars have
happens
to
when you try to
align.
get off. Well, Mercury has to be in retrograde, and I
It
have to
has
have
to
my
be. The moon.
caffeine.
It's the moon has to be in retrograde.
The moon's in retrograde. We've all got issues. Don't look up.
Yeah. I watched that the other night again, by the way.
It's just good.
It makes me laugh to watch it and see the similarities in idiocy that's out there. So, I don't know. It's kind of ridiculous.
Don't look up. They're trying to fool you.
Oh,
What is it the talk show people say? We like the happy thoughts here, or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Wow.
And then the Bash
little
guy, like
asteroid.
the head of Bash, like really.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I don't know what to say other than that.
It's a recommended watch, though. It's actually a really good movie. Well done.
It is,
Well
yeah.
acted. Well written. Pretty on the nose for some things.
I'm legitimately a big fan of the writing in that movie. Just how they, not necessarily like the negativity in connection with the event, but just how people are so oblivious and disconnected from reality. Like, yeah, totally.
Yeah, and attempting to be more so at times.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
it's like it seems so. The way they did it was really good in that movie. We had not planned to talk about this, but the way they did it was so well done because it was on the nose. I mean, it's definitely on the nose, right? Anyone who's looking around the world today and seeing what's going on, you're going to be like, oh, that's on the nose. But it wasn't like it was badgering. It wasn't like over. It was funny or lighter. I mean, it's an asteroid headed to Earth, so as light as you can make that subject.
Right. The end of all human beings.
Right. The end of life on this planet. Well, actually, the end of the planet. Right.
Yeah.
It was,
Yeah.
that was the whole story. Yeah. So sorry if you haven't seen it. I just spoiled it for you. Shame on you for not watching it. That's your fault.
One of the funniest parts of that movie that I caught was they were sitting there watching, some daytime show like The View or something, daytime whatever, interviewing. And there was a musical artist that was on the show. And as the drama happened, the son is like on the couch, like, oh, my phone just bought the album without. It didn't even ask me. Like,
We were
and then
actually
like
talking
5
about
minutes
this-
later, he's like, it did it again. It bought a different album. Like,
this morning when we were talking about it was funny because I was talking to Happa. We share a love for Olokai shoes, and I was like, did you know they have boots? And I assumed Happa knew this, and he was holding out on me. But he's like, I didn't know.
no
they had
idea.
boots. But I had, for the first time in I don't know 2 years, opened Facebook, and I was like, oh, let me see what's going on Facebook. What is Facebook like now? And I scroll, and there's an advertisement for Olokai boots. Now, are you serious? Like,
Yeah,
yes, I would
yeah.
love a pair of boots, and yes, I love Olokai, but why do you know that?
Well, I joked that the vaccine was actually a chip, a microchip that got.
I'm
in
transmitting
all
my
this.
advertising preferences
Yeah.
where I go.
Yeah. Like, careful where
Yeah,
you
boots
walk.
were
You never
cool.
know.
Those boots were pretty cool.
Yeah,
And
definitely
Olokai-
not a sponsored advert, but if you don't
No.
have
Could be,
Olokai
though.
flip flops, in fact, I'm wearing their flip flops right now.
Could be sponsored. If
oh,
you guys
totally.
sponsor, we'll talk even nicer about you. How about
Hey
that?
guys, I know you're watching. So anyway, we took a left turn.
Bit of a turn. It is November the 30th, 2023. Can you believe we are at the? We're almost done with this whole year, man. That's crazy to me.
December, is that tomorrow? Tomorrow's December or Saturday? Tomorrow.
Tomorrow is December the 1st. Yeah,
Oh my gosh. Where did
I
the
had to
year
verify
go?
that. I'm that.
Yeah.
I'm an idiot. I actually did pull it up. I was like, what?
I don't know
the.
I don't know the trick
Right.
that they.
I don't
know
either.
that.
I don't either. I know how to use a calendar though. Y'all like looking at my hands. I'm like, I clicked the little calendar.
Yeah.
I don't need tricks. I got mouse clicks. But the so tomorrow is December, last month of 2023, and pretty excited. This is podcast number 11 for us. The name of this one is the Boulevardier, and I
man.
think Sir Happa of the Fodder clan that you actually are drinking the drink tonight. So tell us about the Boulevardier.
I learned about the Boulevardier. It is, for those of you that don't know what a Negroni is, a Negroni is equal parts vermouth, Campari, and gin. A Boulevardier, they call it the Negroni's cousin because it's equal parts Campari, vermouth, and whiskey. And they call you to garnish. Well, one of the recipes I saw said garnish with an orange peel. I didn't have oranges. Another article that said citrus, some kind of citrus. I thought the vermouth and Campari, I almost said like I know what I'm talking about here, would pair well with grapefruit, and I happen to have some of the miniature grapefruit, so I peeled some and put it in there, and it's quite tasty, not gonna lie.
Yeah, I think that we were kind of talking about it before we started the podcast. I think that we should start making the drinks before we do the podcast and have them on podcast. I, however, am having a straight Four Roses small batch, so that's how much effort I put in to mixing my drink.
If you're gonna have a drink, though, Four Roses is delicious for sure.
Mm-hmm. It's not a bad direction to go for sure.
No,
for sure.
Can't go wrong.
So we got a pretty. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say in the future, if we do this, I'd mention to Seven that we're probably both gonna need storage space for all the crap we're about to buy.
Yeah,
but whatever.
Kind of here for it.
Yeah,
that's an
odd problem to have.
That sounds like a grown-up thing to have.
Yeah, that's why you have a wife. She takes care of everything.
She's the grown-up. That's very accurate.
Behind every successful man is a very just lost and blown away woman that runs everything.
Yes. I'm her third child, no doubt about it. So we have a pretty interesting lineup tonight, Haben. We were talking before the podcast, and we've got some subjects tonight that we're going to hit, but also we're probably going to revisit some things from previous podcasts. So if you're listening, if you're not watching the YouTube video, so every time we do this, we do it on YouTube live. You can come catch us on the stream at Real Talk with Happen and 7. And we do watch chat and we talk. We're talking to Rita tonight, and Rita's hanging out, and some other folks will probably pop by. But then if you're listening, because this is available anywhere just as a podcast, no matter where you get your podcasts, if you are listening, it might be worth listening to some of the other podcasts first, because we will probably reference back to some of the things we've talked about. Some of the subjects we're going to have tonight are continuations of 4 and 5 podcasts long at this point. One of the subjects, which Hava doesn't want to talk about, but I'm going to make him, I think, is probably one of the things we've talked about. If we've done 11 podcasts, we've talked about this on 15 of them. So we'll go through the subjects that we have, but also we are going to freeform a little bit tonight, maybe more so than we've done in the past. So we'll see how it goes. I'm excited to do this. Hap and I always have fun conversations. So, however, to go through the title and make sure we don't miss anything, the subjects for tonight that we planned are pretty interesting. So NASA has tested deep space laser communication. I think that's really fascinating. We're going to talk about the long-term shore stability issues from the Deepwater Horizon tragedy, but it's not going to just be about the shore stability issues, right? That's where kind of the article started, but there's going to be a lot more conversation about that. Hey, we human beings have done a thing, the first successful eye transplant. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some other stuff that goes around with that. And then we're going to talk about the protein problem. And if you are new to the podcast and this is the first time you're hearing it, you're going to say, what is the protein problem? And I understand why you would be confused. However, if you've been listening to us for 4 or 5 podcasts, or you've been watching us on YouTube, you would know there is an absolute, in particular, a HAPA passion point about the protein situation on the planet currently, but in particular in the United States. So beyond that, we'll do some of our normal stuff. We'll find out what HAPA's been watching. We'll probably find out what I've been listening to. Talk about what games we've been playing together, which that should be fun. And then we'll talk about HAPA's rules for good living. So yeah, HAPA. Does that sound good to you?
That's about spot on. Yeah.
So let's talk about this NASA laser communication. So the test, right? There's a mission going on, right? It's called Psych, is the mission, and there's a piece of test equipment on this satellite that we've sent out into space to go do whatever. And the thing it's doing is not related to this thing I'm going to talk about, but it has on board equipment to have laser communication with planet Earth. It has now reached 10 million miles, so it's traveled 10 million miles, and has turned around, pointed a laser at Earth, and we on Earth have received that laser communication. Now, what that means is we will be able to transmit HD video. As an example, we can the amount of data you can transmit over a laser is enormous. So we had done some of these. We had done some of these in orbit. We had done some of these. We're going to use these on the moon mission when we go do an orbit around the moon. We're going to use the laser communication, but we've never done it deep space. So I'm fascinated by this.
What did they consider deep space? Did you?
This case was 10 million miles.
Okay.
So about 40 times. Yeah, about 40 times the distance of the moon is how far away it was. Yeah. Yeah. So, Hapa, you've done some targeting in your time.
Yes.
Tell me what it's like to target at 10 million miles and with a laser.
Well, in space? In space.
Sure. I mean, targeting at 10 million miles sounds like a challenge to me.
Well, so to be clear, if you're doing it with light rays and laser, it wouldn't actually be that difficult.
Tell me. So you're 10 million miles away. How small must the target be to the device trying to target?
In theory, you wouldn't. Well, if you're talking about like an actual receiver, I guess that changes things a little bit because you're hitting a very specific end of a pin with a very specific end of a pin, right? Like, but
you're making the needles meet at 10 million.
Yes.
I can't even do it with my pinkies. Look how.
So that changes the metric a smidge because that is extremely difficult. But in terms of communication, I remember reading articles, years and years ago where they at that time theorized that that's how you're going to want to communicate is with lasers in space because of the fact that it is a straight shot. But I guess my question is, because there is quote unquote dust out there and gravity doesn't particularly affect light as bad as other things might, but 10 million miles, okay, because what is Mars is like 100 and something, 140 million miles, so it, roughly a sixth, a seventh of that is what we shot for. I'm just wondering, what kind of power out do you have to have in order to maintain fidelity at the receiver? That's what I'm thinking as a bigger deal than necessarily the aim, I suppose.
So you're talking about the power output, the power of the laser. Yeah, I think that's not a bad call out. There was a time in my life, believe it or not, where I actually looked into laser communication for a practical purpose. Was working to build a network, and it was between multiple buildings in a city, and this network needed to be secure. And a lot of options were on the table for building that network. Wi-Fi was not one of them. Could not use public wires and things for a lot of reasons. And laser at the time was one that someone had recommended, and they were, it was a company that was trying to push and say, oh, hey, let's use laser communication. Of course, the big one is one you mentioned, which is line of sight, right? You have to have a clear, it's light, so you have to have a clear line of sight to make it work. And it was really fascinating how much data they could transfer via lasers then. And so I can see radio transmission is what's used now, which is similar to, if you've ever heard of my gosh, I'm old, but if you've ever heard like a fax machine or a dial-up modem, it's that sort of, it's sound communication. And that, while it is dependable, is not high fidelity, not high bandwidth. You can only submit so much data at a time, and so it's really hard to get, even our Mars rovers, it's hard to get a lot of data from them. It takes a long time to get it. And so lasers can be a big game changer, but it seems like a lot could go wrong, right? It seems like at 10 million miles away, hitting the target is an enormous, complex issue, and the least of your issues, right? That's like this enormous, complex issue, and it's the least of them, right? Dust, a single piece of dust could screw up your transmission, and I'm sure they have good fault tolerance and stuff. But the level of achievement that we're talking about, I mean, you and I have talked and wondered before about some of the things going on in space, travel, exploration, and not enough, my opinion is not enough people are paying attention to it.
Not at all.
We dig for articles, we dig for news, and lately we dig harder than we used to because of a lot going on in the world. And I don't think a lot of people are digging for that information, and it's to me some of the coolest stuff we do. But transmitting data in any form at 10 million miles is mind-blowing. So it is kind of interesting that we're taking for granted that you could do it, because it's commonplace now for us to transmit something from Mars or
yeah,
whatever. But they're doing it with light, and so yeah, I thought that was a pretty neat little header.
Well, and I think from what I gather from this type of communication too, the data packet bursts are going to be a lot shorter too. So you mentioned like tolerances. I imagine they may do like they'll duplicate the same transmission a few times, but they could do it in a significantly shorter time than they would do with radar, right, or radio. So there would be probably another reason to say that there'd be more fidelity there, right? Because whatever's receiving, in theory, would be able to notice errors due to whatever stuff crossing the path, and then updating it with the next patch that's the same data, right?
Yep.
So I suppose at the end of the day, it wouldn't be a problem, maybe. But
so light travels faster, right? Like so.
Yeah, significantly.
Probably talking about. Let's see what is. I'm gonna see if it says in the article. I'm looking at the article now. Okay, it looks like it took only 50 seconds to make the
10 million miles.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So that's a big deal.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
So you're talking about even going to Mars, like a couple minute turnaround.
Right.
That's crazy.
That's a big deal. Yeah, that's a big deal. Imagine if you've ever seen the movie The Martian. If you have not, you should. But imagine being one of the few folks who go to Mars, because we're obsessed with having a manned mission to Mars, and we're gonna have one way or the other. And imagine you're one of the people who makes it to Mars and you're alive, and something comes up. The time of communication back to someone, an engineer, right, who can help you solve the problem or whoever it might be, that's a big deal, right? If you've ever been in a situation where time slows down, because you're in a, heaven forbid, a car wreck, or you lose control of a car or something like that, time slows down. Things happen quick, and being able to communicate over long distances like that, that's pretty cool. Outside of quantum communications, which should be instant, right? We can't do it. So far, physics, we don't know any way to do better than light, right? Outside of quantum communication. And quantum is pretty cool, though.
So did they say what this, obviously this is a test for supplementing future missions, but did they say what the end goal was, like what they're heading toward with this?
The actual the mission itself or the test?
Either, both.
The communication test is because there's been a bunch of people saying we should be using lasers to communicate. They've been saying it for some time. A laser, for anyone who's not really familiar, lasers have been in a lot of science fiction in a lot of people's heads for a long time. A laser is just a super, 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 super strong and focused beam of light.
Yeah.
And what's special about a laser is it doesn't spread out like a lot of light does, like a flashlight or something like that. The light spreads out, but a laser doesn't do that. It remains really focused. And so they figured out how to transmit data. And so it really is to have faster transmission of data, but also higher bandwidth, right? So they can send bigger files more often. So yeah, that's what they're shooting for. And there's been a bunch of people contending they could do it. Apparently they can. I think they've got a lot left to do to say, hey, how do we shore it up? But yeah, the initial experiment's done, and I'm pretty excited about what that could mean. If I could get high def video from the asteroid belt, that'd be pretty cool.
I wonder if we're ever gonna get to a point where it's just gonna be meh, kind of a meh thing, like landing on the moon was after the first 10 times or whatever.
Yeah. You watched All Mankind, haven't you? For All Mankind, if you haven't watched that, it's
fantastic show.
Yep. People stopped playing. Even now, people have stopped somewhat paying attention to what we're doing in space.
It's nuts to me. It really is nuts that, I guess I get it, because if you've got your own stuff going on and everything, but it is, to have a human out there, even just orbiting, to me, is insane. Like that we do that. Humans do that. Right?
And take it for granted.
Yes.
I was in Minneapolis, in fact, and was standing outside of a steak restaurant in Minneapolis, and got an alarm on my phone because I have an app on my phone that tells me when certain things go overhead. Because I like to skywatch. I think it's cool. And the ISS, the International Space Station, went overhead, and I was like, I got the notification, saw it on my watch. I was like, let me see if I can find it. There it goes. beautiful clear night. Even in a city like Minneapolis, which has plenty of light pollution, you can still see the ISS. It's incredibly
crazy.
bright in the sky. And I was like, oh, guys, I was with several people. I was like, hey, look, it's the International Space Station. And people were like, no, it's an airplane. I was like, no, that's the International Space Station. You can't see the International Space Station with a naked eye. And I was like, that is the International Space Station.
You are literally looking at it.
Right now, going across this. No, it's an airplane. I promise you it's not an airplane. So what was interesting to me is these were all what most people would consider nerds. Right? Like these were people who would be into science fiction and stuff, and they had never even looked up at the ISS going overhead. And I'm like, do you not realize?
I mean, that's how mundane it's become now. Like, I guess.
Not to me, man. I'll still stargaze.
I think it's fantastic. Like even seeing Starlink satellites, like the line of Starlink satellites.
Oh, the little line going across. Yeah.
That's pretty cool to me to see. Like, and I sincerely wish I lived somewhere where there was less light pollution. If anybody has ever been anywhere like out in the country where so first of all, it's almost impossible to have no light pollution because our planet is so lit up that it's very difficult. That's why a lot of the observatories are above the clouds up on top of mountains now, is to try to get rid of some of that. But if you ever lived in the country, I remember being at sea on the ship, and sometimes just laying out on the deck, and you'd look up and you could literally see satellites like blinking across. And what's really freaky is some of the satellites that were in geosynchronous orbit, they would go from your field of vision left to right, and then you'd literally see them turn around and go back, and they do like this big long ellipse.
Oh, because they're staying in the.
Yeah. Yep. That's crazy.
I live in Alabama. Alabama is actually, if you want to find less light pollution, we have some good spots for it. Not as good as we've got some deserts that have way better spots, but there are some decent spots here, and if you find the right places, you can go watch rocket bodies.
That's awesome.
Like old discarded pieces of rockets and stuff go over. So I think people take for granted when you look up at that sky, that's the same sky every person on Earth has ever looked up and seen.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like the moon that we look at, that's the same moon that Socrates was looking at, right? That's the same moon that Joan of Arc looked at, right? It's the same one doing the same things. And to me, it makes me feel in a really good way. I mean, in a good way. But looking up at like the night sky and actually seeing those things makes me feel insignificant, which I think humans should spend more time feeling insignificant.
Yeah.
But you sit and you look and you're like, wow, we're really tiny in this huge, enormous, crazy universe floating through on this little blue ball, that we call home. Right? The only perfect spaceship that's ever been built is Earth. And
it's crazy, man.
Yep. So segueing into, this is our perfect spaceship. Why are we're kind of destroying it, in a lot of ways. We're doing some stuff. And while I'm not a Greenpeace guy, I still hate when stuff happens like the Deepwater Horizon. Now, let me say this though. I don't think you need to be a Greenpeace guy to necessarily not necessarily maybe be appalled, but like blown away by the impact. Yep.
Like yep. I don't think that's necessary.
Well, by way of introduction, there was an article, you sent it to me. I have not read all of it, but it was about the Deepwater Horizon oil rig that blew up, or didn't blow up. It did blow up in the Gulf of Mexico. And this was in 2000, I think we said 2010. 800 million liters of oil got dumped into the Gulf. And so this article you sent was specifically, if I'm remembering, and I wrote it down, it was about long-term shore stability. So tell me a little bit more about what you were reading there. And I know that's not your only thoughts on it, and I have a lot. I mean, I live on the Gulf Coast, right? So I've lived here my whole life, so I have a lot of opinions on this. But tell me what you were reading in that article that made you want to bring it up.
Well, what's interesting to me, and I actually meandered to this topic because I was reading another topic where, and we talked about it a few episodes ago, where I think I just mentioned it in passing, but they were talking about how the salinity of the water is creeping up the Mississippi. It's getting further and further north, And this is becoming a problem because the ecosystems along the Gulf Coast, along the Delta, depend a lot along that freshwater rotation, how it kind of mixes and flushes itself. And as a byproduct of a lot of that, a lot of the Delta, Louisiana and Georgia and Alabama and all that, they're constantly fighting shore erosion. That's a very normal issue, all the way from Florida's, west coast all the way up and over to southeast Texas. It's always been a problem. But what they found when they started studying this is they noticed they were seeing particles of carbon, like carbon particles, essentially sludge in the dirt. And they immediately knew that's what it was, that it was from the oil spill, but they weren't sure the lengths at which it was really impacting.
So they found something they didn't like, and they were like, I know what caused that. Now I want to know what was it doing?
Yes. And I think I'd read to you the number. There's a certain number that's normal to see a lot of these particles in shore soil, throughout close areas near bodies of water. And 1 year after this disaster, it was literally like...
Yeah, I actually got the numbers.
Yeah.
So the average before the disaster was 23.9 nanograms per gram of sediment. It's the oil concentration, right, in these soils.
Yep.
After the disaster, it was 17,152 nanograms per gram of sediment. That was a year after the disaster in 2011.
I think if you do the math, a nanogram is a thousandth. I think. I don't quote me on that. I'd have to look that up. So that would mean that you've actually, at that point, you've got not a nano, you've got a gram, like 1.7 grams, actually. I think. How many nanograms is? You said 17,000?
17,152 nanograms per gram of sediment is the number we ended up with in 2011.
So a nanogram is significantly smaller than
a millionth?
A gram. It's actually... So that turns out to be 0.0001715 grams. Okay. So it's actually very, very, very small. But so I was wrong. Okay. It's the other way. Anyway.
Well, still, you've gone you've gone from 23.9 before to 17,152 after.
Crazy.
And in 2018, it had dropped back down to 247. So in 2018, which is 8 years after the accident, disaster, whatever you want to call it, you're still 10 times more oil in the soil than you were before. And you and I were talking about it before the podcast. Like, people take for granted what it means when you've got something in your soil.
Yeah, people don't recognize how important an ecosystem is, like soil ecosystem. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily like worms and wildlife digging and all that. Like, there's actual bioorganisms in soil, and especially soil along bodies of water, right? Because it washes in and out. As your tide comes in, the soil gets saturated, and then the tide goes out and it dries out. And that biome is very important for the life of, I know it sounds silly, but the life of the land, like in general.
Absolutely.
And so
the plants,
when it's
plants gotta eat too.
Yep. And the plants hold the soil together, and if the soil is poisoned, the plants die, and then there you go. The soil just starts crumbling and falling away,
Yep.
And
eroding while the ocean is rising.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you're at this point now where, the direct shot off from the Deepwater Horizon, they checked all that soil, and it's just falling into the Gulf, like nonstop falling into the Gulf.
Yeah, the number here is, I'm going to read directly from the article.
Yep.
Soil strength also declined by half after the spill. Before the spill, the average strength of the top 30 centimeters of soil was 26.9 kilopascals, which measures pressure in physics. The soil strength dropped down to 11.5 kilopascals at a low point in 2011. So it still hasn't recovered, according to this. They're at 16.4 now, but not back up to 26.9, which is where they need to be. And that soil, like you said, on a body of water, is already doing a lot of work. Right? Water erodes soil naturally, right? So it's already doing a lot of work to try and keep the land.
Yeah.
I will tell you, I grew up here, and the Gulf Coast is something. When you grow up where I grew up, the Gulf Coast is something you go to a lot, right? And I would say 3-4 times a year, you're actually sitting and looking at the water in the Gulf Coast. And generally, when you're me or you're part of my family, you probably have some seafood while you're there.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, we didn't go for 2 years after Deepwater Horizon because we went 6 months after, and the beaches were actually messed up. Right? It actually.
Oh man.
Right? You can smell it. It's there. Right? It's for real. It's people like, oh, it happened off way in the distance. No. It shows up. Yeah. It shows up right there. And I will tell you this: Gulf shrimp, I've eaten them my whole life, and after 2010, they never tasted the same.
Oh wow.
They have an actual flavor, and I will stand by this. People can say I'm crazy. I ate them my whole life. They taste different now than they tasted then, and to me, it's notable.
I wonder if that's why I don't like Gulf shrimp. When I moved to Southeast Texas, everybody was heeing and hawing about, hey, you gotta try Gulf shrimp. And I remember I tried Gulf shrimp from 3 or 4 different places, and I did not like the flavor. There was something about the flavor of Gulf shrimp. It just, honestly, they tasted dirty. Like, they just tasted dirty to me.
They used to taste sweet and buttery.
Yeah, see, I didn't get any of that.
Right, and they had a reputation for being like that sweet and buttery kind of flavor. And now there's an edge to them, and describing it as an oil flavor. I mean, that
actually kind of blows me away because, like, because let me say this: if you don't live near the Gulf Coast, you don't understand how big of a deal the seafood industry in the Gulf is to that. And you're talking from Florida all the way up and across and down almost to Mexico. Like, all of that is dependent on, yes, the oil industry, obviously, but if you're wanting to talk about a non-artificial income, because that's essentially what fishing wildlife is, it's very dependent on it. So to have something like that, I can't imagine how devastated it was.
There were so many, shrimp boats that went out of business. Like, it wrecked. It wrecked so many families. I have a good friend who lives in Gulfport, Mississippi, and what that did, and she moved down there many years back, but it was before 2010. And what that did to that, Gulfport, Mississippi is not a big town.
Yeah.
But it was a stable town, right, for certain kinds of tourism and food, and has its charms and its allures and its mom and pops, places to stay, and its mom and pop restaurants, and those are the places that go first.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would say that the Deepwater Horizon, and others like it, it's not the only one, right? But those disasters are something that people, I think, should dedicate a lot of attention to when they occur. Because the companies that operate these rigs, right? We trust them with a lot. And I know people in the oil industry. I'm not saying, oh, oil is evil. I am not doing that. But we put a lot of trust in these rigs to handle things responsibly and do things the right way. And we should hold them to those standards, because when it doesn't go right, it goes really bad.
Did you ever watch the movie?
No, you mean talking Deepwater Horizon movie? No, I haven't.
Yeah, I would watch it. I'm sure they took liberties to make it a little bit more dramatic, but from what I read, because Rita and I watched the movie, and then I did some reading afterwards, and the folks that are portrayed in that disaster, supposedly they said they got the story pretty dead on, that the technicians and the people working on the rig were constantly begging for upgrades and money to do repairs and so on and so forth. And the oil company was just trying to squeeze every last penny out without spending anything. And eventually that's what happened on that rig. Was there was so much stuff that needed to be repaired or replaced that it all built up to a breaking point, and then the rig just failed. Like, and that to me is like the crux of the problem with humans on the planet. You and I had talked about this too, about greed. Like, if you get money into things, it just ruins whatever money touches, like, period. And I would never for a million years believe that the technicians and managers and stuff on that platform were of the mindset of, I'm just trying to pull as much money out of this as I can and I don't give a shit. Like, I promise you those folks were probably trying to make do with what they got, right? It's sure. the high up guys that have $1 million bonuses at the end of the day and are worried about making the $1 million bonus that say, nah, we don't need to give them maintenance money or whatever, right? Like, that's the biggest problem.
They get so far removed. You know, it's interesting because these companies are so big.
Yeah.
And, you know, Fukushima is another good example. You start if you go through these tragedies, right? Chernobyl's another example. You just keep going down the list. There's always an engineer that is sitting there that said, I told you this was going to happen, right? There's a reason engineers go to school. Engineering is engineering is interesting. If you go to school, hey, I'm going to go get a 4-year degree, I'm going to be an engineer. You're going to be held to an engineering standard, right? It's not just like you can't walk out of high school and say, I'm an engineer now. You can't do that, right? You have to be an engineer.
Yeah.
And they have, certifications. They have a lot of licensing. They continuing educations. They do these things. And because of that, there's almost always an engineer that's like, oh, I'm not guessing when I tell you this thing's going to fail, right? I'm not guessing. I'm telling you it's going to. And it's just a matter of time. And almost every one of these tragedies, you can go and you can find whoever it was that was like, this ain't gonna work, right? Humans have gotten really good. Engineers, I think the medical industry and engineering in particular, have gotten really good at taking that knowledge and transferring it to the next generation, and then adding to the knowledge and transferring it to the next generation. They do a really good job of that. So when you're talking about things like tensile strength of metals, right? Like, there's people who can tell you absolutely it will. Or it won't. They can tell you a carbon fiber submarine's a bad idea.
Yeah,
they can tell you
yeah,
this is not a good idea. And it always amazes me because the people who are making the decisions that end up being the person you would point at and say, hey, that's the person holding the bag, made the bad decision. There were warnings. They're usually so far removed from the reality of what it is they're trying to deal with. Right, that person did not work on an oil rig. That person was not in the Gulf of Mexico. That person was somewhere else in some other room in some comfortable chair, probably wearing a suit that's more expensive than my truck, and was like, to me, it's not a human thing. It's just an entry on a spreadsheet. And I said no.
Yeah.
It's just, to me, it was just a thing on a list, and I said no to it because I said yes to 3 other things, right? And it's not like a bad intention thing. But we have gotten companies and organizations, and they're so big that these are the things that happen. And when they happen, they're not a little bit bad anymore. It's not a couple of guys in a fishing boat doing something stupid.
Well, and I think that's a huge piece of human hubris, too, to the idea that the company didn't recognize. Maybe it was the idea, well, it's so outlandish that we're going to pump almost 1 billion liters of petrol into the Gulf of Mexico. That could never happen, right? And then when it does happen, they're going to try to deny and ignore the impact as much as possible, right? Because I am sure that, was it British Petrol that owned that? I'm pretty sure it was. Yeah, I think it was British Petrol. I promise you that they tried as hard as they could to keep from having to pay anything to compensate anyone that was impacted as a result of that. Even now, you got, like we talked about, soil erosion probably, where, literally parts of 4 or 5 different states are falling into the Gulf, and like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do about that? Like, like you're not going to do anything about it. It's too late. Well, it's now 13 years ago. Well, it's not our problem. That's 13 years ago. Well,
Yep.
hate to tell you, it's probably a generational problem at this point now.
Oh, it's absolutely, it is absolutely. We don't even know, right? We're doing
Yeah,
the research
yeah,
now.
yeah.
Here we are 13 years later, and someone did a unique study, which is, I think, the first time they've ever done a study to see what it's eroding faster than it was.
Yeah.
What does an oil spill do to the soil, right? And so someone was like, I want to study that, went and got funding for the study, went and published the results of that study. And what it shows is these tragedies are at least decades long.
Yeah.
Right, if not longer, right? But they're at least decades long because we're 13 years out from this one. So, like, it's at least. So these environmental, like you said, you don't have to be Greenpeace to care, and everyone should care, because if you don't, I tell you, man, the shrimp tastes different. That means something different about the shrimp, right? That ecosystem.
That's crazy.
There's a lot of stuff that eats that shrimp.
Yeah.
In the ecosystem, right? So your grouper tastes different too. Just a heads up.
Yeah.
Right. Like
yeah.
Everything through that ecosystem, and now you're part of that ecosystem, right? So if something going to eat you, you can taste different, right? Like there's something different going on with you,
man.
So these things are. That's how ecosystems work. We're all interconnected. Again, I say it all the time. This is the only perfect spaceship ever built. We're riding around on it.
We sure are trying to make it not perfect. That's for sure.
I know. Maybe we should clean it up. But every once in a while, every once in a while, humans surprise me. And recently, there was, again, this is your article, so I'm going to let you run with it.
Yeah.
The first successful eye transplant.
Yeah, man.
Dude needed an eye. Doctor said, I got you, bro.
Yeah.
Dude got an eye. An eye transplant.
So, and to be clear, this wasn't the first attempt. They've done it a few times. Gentleman by the name of Aaron James. He used to be I don't know what the technical term is for his job, but he worked with high power electricity. Yeah, I guess lineman is technically what it is. And he got one of the things that I remember when I went through electronics and electrical school when I was in the Navy was it was always repeated over and over and over. You got to be careful, because it'll reach out and bite you. Yep. And I'm trying to find the exact wattage or amperage that the young man got hit with. Young man, he's older than me, but
he's 46.
He got zapped, and essentially he died on the spot. They revived him, but his face was badly burned. He lost his left eye. I think he lost one of his arms as well. Anyway, going back to this, so they've tried to do eye transplants numerous times, but rejection and everything. The eye is shown to be an especially annoying organ to try to transplant, mainly because of rejection. So they have successfully transplanted a man's eye, and he actually is getting the eyesight slowly coming back. Is what it said. So. I think what's interesting in the article is where the surgeons actually says that they for every transplant they learn from, like every single transplant.
Sure,
this one they learned a tremendous amount as well. But to be clear, the reason I put this article on there is because I think it is also phenomenal what the medical field is doing in terms of replacement of various organs, because there was also another article where I read where there was a gentleman that had a spine transplant also. He had spine. He had Parkinson's really bad, and I guess it alleviated some of his shaking, having his spine replaced. I don't know how those two correlate. I didn't do the digging to find that out, but same time frame. Last couple weeks they did a spine transplant. The eye transplant, like obviously sight is something that I think a lot of people definitely take for granted.
I know. I certainly did. Right. You heard that story from me. I'm older, and people think I'm beyond 23, and I played baseball well into my 40s and had better than perfect vision my whole life, and took it for granted.
Yeah.
Not in a way that like I was very thankful for my eyesight, but you take for granted what it allows you to do because it's just the way you see, and you don't see what anyone else sees. And vision it changes your world when it shifts even a little. I have some glasses. I wear them occasionally when I'm at a computer or I'm reading. I don't need them all the time, but now that I put them on and I can see better, I realize, right, how far my vision had gone. Even a little shift like that is life changing. So when you're talking about losing an eye or losing vision altogether, especially this guy was 46, right?
Yeah.
He was doing his job. He got hit by electricity. His eye wasn't the only thing that got messed up. This guy went through like a life-altering set of things. And the fact that we can say, hey, you know what? We can get a new eye. We can hook you up. Maybe bring a little bit of your normalcy back. You get a new spine, right? You get a new heart, right? You were talking about hearts.
Yeah.
Or is it pig hearts? I think you were talking about
Yeah, well, I'll get to that. But one of the things I wanted to mention about this guy specifically was they weren't giving him 20/20 vision. To be clear, they were because the eye had literally been. I mean, not to get too morbid, but it was removed from his face when he got hit. So there was a gaping hole there, and that's what they were doing, was trying to put the organ back in and hopefully restore some functionality. And what actually turned out happening was his brain actually started interpreting vision, which wasn't supposed to be a product of this transplant. They were simply trying to get
this was
the
unintended. They were just trying to get the guy to have an eye.
Yes, so and he started seeing...
It was actually part of a face transplant, right? So
Correct.
I guess it was more seen for like the cosmetic. I need an eye in my head.
Yes.
And so what you're saying is they did that, but then the brain was like, I got this.
Yeah. And the surgeon even in there says this might be a fluke. Like, we connected the optic nerves. We did not anticipate him getting vision back, but when they do, how they do the optic check with the flashlight in the eye, they noticed that the retina was constricting and he was seeing the light. Yeah, and so he had said, the surgeon had said, well, evidently the brain saw the eye connected and is actually starting to interpret vision through
that's amazing
the eye. And that's why this was such a big deal, because they not only connected the muscle and everything, but the actual nerves themselves and the optic line to the brain, which, I mean, again, somebody that's far more intelligent than I'd ever be that's able to see this stuff. I mean, that's crazy to me. But yeah, so the first successful eye transplant, I mean, that's a big step, I think. So pretty soon.
I do too. I do too. And like you said, Google they learn every time. The little floppy. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was doing some work, and a woman she's an educator, right? But she's a doctor, and she had these glasses that she had me wear, and they were some sort of prismatic glasses. And what it did was shifted your vision something like 3 inches to the left or 3 inches to the right. And so when you put them on, you see the room just as clear as everything. So you don't even know you've got glasses on, but everything in the room is actually 3 inches to the left or 3 inches to the right from what is normal. And what the illustration is you reach out. She holds something up. She's got to reach out and touch it. You reach to the right of it, right?
Yeah.
She puts it down. She reaches back and reach out to touch it. You're a little closer. She does that enough times, and this is like in the span of 15 seconds. This is not a long process.
Your brain compensates.
Your brain has remapped.
That's crazy.
I can see now where you're reaching up and touching it. Then you take them off, and guess what? She holds it back up.
Now
and
you're
to
the
left
opposite.
Of it. Yeah. So the ability for the human body to repair itself, to move forward, we're just scratching the surface of what we're able to do. And every time you have something like this, where a doctor is like, "Hey, look, I'm gonna do an eye transplant," and it turns out a little bit better. They did a little different. His body reacted a little different. There's somebody else out there that's going to need an eye transplant, and they're going to know a little bit more next time.
Yeah.
And over a long arc, humans are getting better at being humans, and at repairing our bodies. And I think that's just fascinating. I hope that in 100 years, right, that most ailments can be fixed. Of course, by then, only the rich people will be able to do it, and the poor people can just, will be the ones giving up their eyes. But
that's the big problem, right? Is things are going to get more and more expensive, and pretty soon we're going to be in a world of Elysium where, all the rich people live off the planet and we're all on the planet, right? Yeah,
that's a good one though.
Yeah, I mean, but so like getting to the heart thing we're talking about though, that one is interesting because I always remember through the years, I don't know why this always stuck out to me, but I always remember reading that pig hearts or pig organs are the closest to human organs. So the idea of science fiction years ago was that perhaps someday you could grow a human heart in a pig and then use that as a transplantable organ. Okay. So we're at a point now where just the last couple weeks they had a pig with a genetically modified heart.
Okay.
That heart transplanted into a human, and that human has been living for the last 3 months on this heart with no rejection symptoms.
Okay, that's amazing. Right?
And they were on a heart transplant list for however long, I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, pig hearts are easier to get than human hearts.
Obviously, yes. Plus, pig's good. Pig's yummy, so.
I like some pork.
It's like a twofer kind of thing. You know, you get a heart and you get dinner.
You don't waste anything. Waste not, want not, right?
I'm just saying.
Yeah. So this person's been living for how long now? With this with the pig heart?
I think the article I read was a few weeks old, but at that time they had said several months. So, and they did mention that they were still trying to figure out if this is a temporary fix while you wait on a list for a compatible human heart, or if they could permanently
is this just good to go?
So
how amazing. And
I think that's the idea, right, is the long-term
heart transplants. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I think that's the discussion here, right, is the long-term. That's probably what they're doing, is they're trying to see what the long-term effects of having this heart, you know, because I mean, I don't think people realize how difficult transplanting organs in general is, from besides the obvious like supply of where do you get these organs.
Besides the getting of an organ, yes.
But the fact that you may have all the things in line to show that you're compatible, they do the transplant and then it gets rejected for whatever reason, you know.
Yeah, and there's really no perfected way of knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's something that maybe you're right. People don't necessarily realize, but even with bone grafts, right? If you ever have to have a bone graft, which I've had to have a bone graft, right? And they start talking to you about, well, do you want cadaver bone, right? You want a bone from another human, or do you want artificial bone? Yeah. And the question the first time you have to hear that is like, wait, what did you just ask me? You know? To me, it's been a bone graft until today, and the doctor's like, so you can get cadaver bone, right, which came out of another human being, or you can get bone that we grew in a lab. And I remember my mind being blown, and I was like, I really don't know what I think about having another human's bone in me.
Yeah.
Like, you start thinking about that, but then you ask the question, what is a synthetic bone? What's the differences? Well, people more often reject the synthetic bone.
Which makes sense. Your body knows that it's not real, and so it gets rejected.
Yeah.
I have that in my left shoulder. I had a complete shoulder reconstruction, and so I have cadaver tendons throughout my entire shoulder.
Cadaver?
Yeah, they asked me the same thing. I remember that, yeah.
I went with synthetic. And I remember many years after that, right? So mine's actually right here in my face. And so many years after that, I was doing some work and found myself in a lab where they were doing experimental biomed research. Sure. And they were actually working with bone grafts. And one of the things that they have with bone grafts is part of the, rejection is part of it, but also it can grow in ways that are unpredictable. Meaning you're instead of it growing back to like a smooth bone or wherever it could get jagged, it can do a lot of things. And they were trying to work out, how to make that less
interesting.
Yeah. And so what people are doing is, these guys, these folks, man, it was crazy, right? So story time, right? But they were like, hey, let's graft in some DNA from a certain frog and a certain lizard so that under a black light, the grafted bone glows a different color. Yeah. So that we can see exactly under a microscope which part's grafted and where it's growing. Because they have to be able to do that. Otherwise, it just becomes one bone. Yeah. And so the stuff that humans are doing for other humans, if you look in the right places, is pretty fantastic, pretty amazing.
So what you're saying is your nose glows under black light?
No, I didn't. No, these. I just went with the old. I went with the old synthetic bone, and we're good to go. But yeah, the lab folks, that was pretty interesting to watch, right? To see.
It's funny that you mentioned that question because I hadn't really. So I had my reconstructive shoulder surgery back in 2007. So I really did a lot of damage. I just separated my pec from my shoulder. A lot of people don't realize your pec muscle wraps up and over your shoulder. I separated that. I tore over 50% of the cartilage.
The worst way to realize it is
the
way you realized it.
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%. I had no idea. You know, everything that could go wrong in a shoulder went wrong. And when they went the same thing, they asked me that question. It's funny because thinking back on it now, I remember having a pause in my like the doctors just spiel it off all kinds of things.
It's just part of the checklist.
And I was like, whoa. What did you just ask me? I have to make a choice of it. Yeah, it's exactly how that conversation went. I was like, I want real bone, but does this mean I'm gonna have like zombie pieces in me? Like I don't understand. You know.
Right?
Like I don't get it.
Is my soul still my own? Like what happens here?
Yeah. And it might sound silly for some, but it is when you're having a major surgery like that, it is something that you kind of just randomly will think about. And I remember saying, well, at the time they asked me what's the best option, or I asked them what the best option was, and for a shoulder specifically, the cadaver's always what you want to do because it's already had flexing to it. It's already been, you know, it's accustomed to movement. And so the recovery is not as bad, you know, for a joint like that. And so that's what I remember. I remember going through that. But I forgot about that.
And you think about, I mean, if you think of that, we were just talking about, you know, eye transplants, right? And every time you do it, you get better. So when you're talking about, someone knows that cadaver works better than synthetic, and there's a reason they know that because somebody got it wrong at some point. And back to engineering in the medical field, they do a really good job of saying, I think we'll write that down and tell the next crew.
Tweak a little bit for the next time.
That didn't go right. That didn't go so well. We're not sure why, but
think about like hip replacements, like how far hip replacements have come. And like I remember when I was young, I had a great uncle that had a hip. Like every 10 years, he was getting a hip replacement, and it was literally because they were learning how to do hip replacements.
Yeah.
So every generation, as you said, they've learned the better techniques. And that to me is like, no, I don't want you cutting into me every 10 years to replace a joint. That's not what I want.
No, if you've ever heard of Dr. Andrews, orthopedic surgeon, right? Legendary orthopedic surgeon. His practice still is here in Birmingham. And hip replacement, Bo Jackson, right? Hurt his hip.
Sure.
But Bo Jackson was if you've never seen the ESPN 30 on 30 with Bo Jackson, you have got to watch it. It is one of the best. But when he tore his hip out of socket, he had never been injured. His body was so unbelievably strong.
I believe
he didn't know what an injury was. Yeah. And so he didn't go tell anybody. You know, he'd been hit, right? He'd had dings here and there, but he'd never been injured. Right. And so he didn't tell anybody. But what had happened is he had separated his hip. And what in that 30 on 30, what Dr. Andrews talks about is if he had told me that day, I would have had it fixed. But because he didn't, it actually, the bone started to die. That's the only reason he had to have a hip replacement. But the statement there that you're making is fascinating to me. Oh, if he'd have told me that day, we would have had him fixed. That's how far we've come if you've got enough money.
Oh, yeah.
And your hip's important enough, right? If you're Bo Jackson. And, you know, the Raiders would probably pay for that. So we have come a long way. Orthopedics have come a long way. The ability for doctors to repair our bodies has come a long way.
Yeah.
And we're coming along, you know, and hopefully we continue. Got, you know, maybe eyes are next, maybe teeth. Regenerating their enamel is on the horizon. How great would it be if the dentist wasn't, you know, a drill into your brain experience every time you went? Like, wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, I think it's funny because my left arm is actually shorter than my right arm because the Navy went so long that I was the ball of my shoulder. I was there was a point before I got the surgery I was dislocating my shoulder. Not kidding you, every single day. Okay. It got to a point where I was dislocating my shoulder and it didn't hurt anymore. It would just happen.
Yeah, so
and I would just grab it and I would just pop it back in.
Anybody who's listening, full disclosure, we have never had this conversation. I've torn both of my rotator cuffs. And so I've had issues with both of mine. And what you're talking about, where it'll come out of socket and back in, and out of socket and back in, that is one of the weirdest experiences. Having had that experience, that's one of the weirdest experiences. And people sleep on how important your shoulder is. If your shoulder hurts, you hurt.
Yeah.
That's just it. When you sleep, how are you going to sleep? Right? How are you
and I sleep on this side. I sleep on this side, so it's like even worse, right?
Yeah. Shoulders are for real, man. So I'm glad you got it repaired. Does it give you any problems?
Honestly, this shoulder is stronger than this one now because when I went to the orthopedic surgeon, which by the way, the surgeon that did the work on this was the #1 orthopedic surgeon on the West Coast. I was his last operation. He left the Navy and started a personal practice right after he did this work on my shoulder. So he did a fantastic job. And I went to all the physical therapy and all that stuff. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't do, right?
You are 100% right.
Yeah.
Do not sleep on PT.
Yeah. Oh God. I remember there was a point because my ex-wife used to come with me to all the physical therapy appointments, and there was two guys. There's two people that were my physical therapists. One was a guy, one was a girl. I called the girl Brunhilde because it was a very big. She was a 5'11" African American woman, very muscular.
Right now,
and I called her Brunhilde.
We did the podcast, you talked about how international this podcast is.
Oh yeah.
So right now, there's a chance, of less than zero chance that someone named Brunhilde is like, what did he just say?
What did he just say? And the other guy, I called him Bubba. And he was
Bubba and Brunhilde?
I called him Bubba and Brunhilde. And there was a point where I remember, because they have to, so people don't realize when you get the shoulder surgery done, they mobilize your arm. And then when they mobilize your arm, it stays that way for however long. And then you go to physical therapy. And at physical therapy, because inside you have scar tissue, that scar tissue has to be broken. And
break it.
And they did, in fact, break it. When they break it, it is one of the most excruciating pains. And I remember specifically, Bubba actually sat across me, straddled my abdomen, and he looked at me and said, at the time I think I was the second class, and he was like, FC2, this is definitely going to hurt you more than it's going to hurt me. And because he joked like that all the time. And all they do is they have your arm like this, and they slowly just force it until it goes through range of motion.
That moment for me, that moment right there that you're talking about. So I go to PT, and I am dead serious when I say do not sleep on PT. The surgery is the surgery. All PT. Go do your PT. If you do your PT, you will get better because the surgeons are wizards. The PTs are wizards too. The physical therapists are wizards. Yeah. So I go and go to my first visit. It's the exact same thing you're talking about, right? This thing's not mobile. Go to my first visit. And my physical therapist, I've never met these people before, so I don't have a preference yet as to who I like, who I don't like, and, whatever. So I'm just like walking in and saying, who is who?
Yeah.
Don't know anybody. I walk in, and a woman, I hear screaming, right? Angry screaming, yelling. And it's in this back office. A woman comes out of that office. She's got to be 16 months pregnant, right? So she comes out of this back office.
16 months pregnant.
5'1", 16 months pregnant, right?
Yeah.
And so she comes out, and she is fuming about something. Well, I'm just some dumb kid from Alabama, right? And I'm like, I'm just here to get my shoulder fixed. And so she puts me on the table, right? And she's like, she starts doing the thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
so bad.
For me, I was in a laying down position, like an incline position, not completely flat, like laying down. So she's like bringing it up, and I'm just like, wow. And like the pain is for real.
Yeah.
And so
I saw stars.
She actually rolls me over, and she does it again, and then she rolls me back over, and she goes to do it again, and she goes, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "This hurts." And she goes, "I told you to tell me if it gets to an 8 of a 10. And I was like, no, ma'am, you didn't. And she said, well, your body's going into shock. So apparently I was like cold sweating. I was shaking, and my eyes were dilating, and she was like, are you okay? And I'm like, sure.
About to call a crash card on you.
Right. I was like, sure. And she's like, was that much pain? I was like, that was as much as I've ever felt. Man. I figured you're the PT, right? Like,
I'll let you do whatever you gotta do.
Physical therapy, right? You're gonna do it. But she's about to tear that thing off. She's about to tear it off and beat me with it.
Yeah, I remember my ex-wife specifically because when he lifted my arm, I was just crying. I just I don't really scream if I'm in pain or scared. I react, and I remember I was crying because it hurt that much, and I saw sprites.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
you could, and by the way, you could hear it. You could hear the scar tissue popping while they're moving it, right? And I remember my ex-wife literally got up and left. She just left. She went out to the car. She couldn't
anymore.
She couldn't watch it. But the cool thing about PT was they do that, but then they immediately do pain management. So massage, ice, electrify, whatever they need to do. And I would tell you, after the pain of whatever that was, that part of it, the pain relief, was the best thing ever, like that ever happened to me. And at the end of it, like you said, after all that PT, this shoulder is definitely stronger than this shoulder. I have full range of motion. I have pain, but the pain is because I have nerve damage from the Navy ignoring it for so long. So they told me, like, you've got damaged nerves in your shoulder and in your back that are just, they're randomly firing constantly because you're never going to fix that.
Which is its own unique kind of pain too.
Oh, it's like
I get struck by lightning in one spot.
Yeah, one of the things I try to tell people is people that have chronic pain. No, people that don't have chronic pain really do not understand what chronic pain is. Like, like people will say they have chronic pain when they really don't. But chronic pain is a legitimately, like, psychologically, emotionally, physically draining thing. And if you really don't have it if you don't have all those effects. Like, anyway.
Yeah. I've been fortunate. I've been very abusive to my body, my life, just through sports. I haven't.
Yeah.
Not like Ozzy Osbourne abusive, but more like sports, right? And you tear your body up. But I've been pretty fortunate to get to the point where as many injuries as I've had, as many injuries as I've recovered from. I've ended up in a pretty good spot. You have pops and crackles, but I would never call anything I've got chronic pain because I know people who have had chronic pain, and you have to learn to manage it. It's a thing you learn to manage, not a thing you learn to ignore, you learn to manage it every day. So it's a real thing. But you know what? Maybe with all these things that we're doing in medicine, maybe we'll learn to help. Nerves are one that they have a hard time with. And so I've got two places on my body where nerves are dead from a surgery, right? And when you're just like, one of them's the end of my thumb. And as someone who's a musician, it's a thing, So if they can get nerves figured out, that'd be a big one. And also with all the the eating happen. Let's talk about eating. So segue.
Was that your attempt at a segue?
That was my attempt at a segue. That one's gonna suck. That
Normally you're really good at segues, man. Yeah, but we are all over the place with our subjects. Come on now.
We are, and we're actually we're doing pretty good on time, but I don't want us to run out. So this one's going to be, I think, one we want to talk about. This is one in particular. I mentioned at the top of the podcast that some of these things we were going to talk about tonight, we've been talking about in an ongoing fashion. The NASA exploration stuff, we've definitely been talking about that a lot. We have a tendency to talk about natural disasters as they occur in their impact, or not natural disasters in nature, right, that humans have caused. We tend to talk about those. Full disclosure, like we said, neither of us are hopping on a boat Greenpeace style, but we both care about the planet. And one that we've been talking about for a minute, and I'm going to let you drive on this, is lab-grown protein, meat, right? Meat that didn't come from slaughtering an animal. And
didn't come from an animal.
Started
period.
Well, we started this 4 podcasts ago, I think. We started talking about this, and it was a story of a company out in California, and it had some investors. I think it made some waves and getting some new investment and stuff. And California was talking about allowing them to take this meat and put it on menus at certain restaurants. So this stuff's starting to be as crazy as it sounded, and as much as I got to be honest, listening back to that podcast, as much as we kind of don't want to take it seriously, right? You want to joke about it? It's real. It's real.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie. I'm full doomsday with this subject. Like it's this.
Yeah.
I'm actually getting a little bit of trepidation and being a little bit scared about it because, to me at least, when we originally talked about this was just hey, this is happening. It's not really that big of a deal. We've figured out a way to grow chicken breast in a vat without a chicken. That's essentially what it is.
Right.
Okay. And so you and I grab a lot of our news or a lot of our topics from AP News website.
Yep.
But every single week that I look, there is always some new article about, well, now they call it meat cultivated cells is now what they're calling it.
Hang on. I'm gonna have to write meat cultivated cells.
Yes, which still
Okay,
sounds
so that's
like
the term.
vat-grown meat to me. It's what it sounds like.
I was just saying, it is an improvement over vat-grown meat, but it's not a big
I don't
one.
think so. I still don't think so. No.
Right?
But the reason that I brought it to Seven's attention this time specifically is there's a whole section in the AP News that the topic is the protein problem. And that what the reason I'm bringing that up is there's an article in here about ranching, cattle ranching. There's an article in here about taste testing of the meat cultivated cells. There's an article in here about how vegans and vegetarians are attempting to make plant-based products more palatable to folks that prefer meat. And
that
then
was
there's
actually
another
one of my
one.
questions the first time we talked about it.
Yeah.
Was, is it vegan? Right.
Yeah.
That seems like a
I
gray
don't
area
think
to me.
I don't think we have an answer for that yet. Really. I mean,
I haven't heard one. No.
Yeah, it's meat. It's still. But anyway, I bring this up because the article, the taste testing, what they talk about, they originally when the vat-grown meat got approved by the FDA to be served to humans, there was a restaurant in Boston and a restaurant in LA that had already put in orders to try to get the vat-grown meat. I'm gonna have a problem with this. You can already tell.
Yeah. No, yeah.
Put in
meat cultivated cells.
There you go. Put on the menu, and every picture, every video, anything that I've tried to look at that has shown this stuff, it doesn't look like meat. It doesn't even look like what chicken nuggets look like. You know how chicken nuggets is like extruded chicken
compacted
mash.
Extruded shaped
Yes.
meat. Yeah.
It doesn't even look like that. To me, it looks more like tofu than it does meat.
Right.
And the taste tests, the people blind taste tests, they couldn't tell the difference, I guess, in the taste. But the reason, let me backtrack. The reason I really want to talk about this is what concerns me is the idea, and there's a line in the article that talked about a bunch of fast food restaurants.
Oh gosh.
Looking at starting to put this in their food.
Yeah.
And not talking about it.
Yeah. No, you know what? I had not thought about that at all.
Yes.
Until the moment you just said it. And
because
wow.
It already appears to be cheaper than buying chicken from a chicken farm.
Sure. If Subway can have their own vat farm.
Yes.
Right. That's got to be way better than paying farmers and dealing with all the things that go agriculturally with chickens.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I had not thought
And the
about
reason-
that, but you know, the food that's fast food too, you could really hide if there were any flavor discrepancies because it's so much salt and sugar.
Yes.
Right, that people expect that. Like the reason
And it's
you go
fast
eat-
food, right? So the texture of the chicken nugget the kid isn't really probably looking for that, right? He's looking for the fried, fatty flavor.
Right. Looking for a McNugget, man.
And I think
what was the show where the kids? What was the chef that wanted to make actual chicken for the kids? And anyway, we'll go back to that. I'll forget. Well, that's another podcast.
Huh.
You know what I'm talking about?
But
He was.
I vaguely do, but I don't know the name either. But this does scare me. And they specifically, and this is what kind of surprises me, by the way, was Chick-fil-A was one of the restaurants that was on the list that was looking to get this chicken. And that kind of surprised me that, yes. That kind of surprises me that they were on that list.
Yeah, that surprises me too.
It doesn't surprise me that McDonald's is on there, Burger King's on there, you know.
Yeah,
but
no, absolutely. Like there's certain you would expect.
Right.
Right.
So I guess my
Chick-fil-A.
question is, at what point do I need to call my congressman and, Yeah,
Oh,
Chick-fil-A,
okay.
sorry. But at what point do I need to call my congressman and tell him I need you to make it law that there's a sticker or a sign or something saying that this is not chicken from a chicken? Like you can't even call it chicken. You have to call it something else.
Well, that's the thing, man. Like, so the debate that we had originally, right? And it was Jamie Oliver. Thank you, Rita, for bringing that up in chat here on YouTube. That was Jamie Oliver did a show. And I think this is pertinent, right? And he celebrity chef, right? And he's like,
Yeah.
kids want chicken McNuggets. It was specifically the McNugget, right? And it's this pressed, formed.
Oh, it's chicken meal, right? That's pressed into a chicken nugget.
It's this goo that they turn into these nuggets. And he's like, if kids knew what was in it,
oh yeah,
I bet they'd want the real thing. And he had all these kids come in, and he made real chicken like nuggets with them. And it's Jamie Oliver, so it's probably good stuff.
Yeah.
And then he said, now let me show you how they make these. And it was like the pink, blah, blah, blah. And he gave them out. Well, at the end of it, and this was really hilarious and sad, but at the end of it, he goes, all right, kids, we've got the chicken nuggets you made, and we got the ones that are at McDonald's. Every kid chose McDonald's.
Yeah, because there's so much chemical crap in there that makes you want that stuff.
Yes. And I can so see fast food restaurants
100%.
being the ones in line to be like, it's not going to be your top end restaurant, right? They value the bone in.
Well, there are a couple top end restaurants that are wanting to serve this on their menu, though. So
that's got to be a gimmick. There's no. You go in. If I go in, I'm like, I want a quarter baked chicken, Mediterranean baked chicken, at some Greek restaurant, and they try to give me something that looks like a tofu.
Oh man,
that'd be the last time I go.
Well, and the thing that upsets me the most about this is I don't think we're necessarily admitting the problem of things that are the chemical reproduction of whatever product, right? Like you see it all the time that it's believed that this is producing cancers and what have you. And we talked about it in past podcasts where California is actually banning certain dyes and they're banning certain chemicals that they're not allowed to be in the food, and et cetera, et cetera. So our bodies are not meant to filter out or process a lot of these chemicals that we are putting into foods to mimic the taste of actual food. So why would we think for one moment that there's no negative side effect to your body attempting to process meat that actually isn't meat, that didn't actually walk around eating stuff? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how and is that, again, are we going back to the human hubris thing that we don't need Mother Nature, we can do it all ourselves? Like, is that where we're at now?
I mean, the other side, the devil's advocate only, the other side of that coin is the environmental impact of consumerism, agriculture.
Sure.
Right? And I'm not talking about agriculture. I'm not going to say that. Like, if you go make a garden in your backyard and you grow your veggies and you eat your veggies and you have a couple of chickens, this is not what I'm talking about. That is sustainable. That is sustenance living. That is a beautiful thing, in my opinion. Yeah. But when you go where I live and you go and you look enough and you start seeing the huge chicken houses and these things, there's a real impact to be talked about. The way that we eat wings, right? Yeah. And the consumerism mentality that we have is enough is never quite enough. And there probably is a limit to how much we can sustainably farm. Yeah. And so there is an argument to be made there about we got to find a better way to do it. We got to find better ways to treat the animals. I'm an animal guy, again, just like I'm not a Greenpeace guy. I'm not a PETA guy. But if I see someone abusing an animal, I got a problem with it.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I mean,
there's arguments to be made there.
Could be solved by just trying it would definitely be just a try, because you couldn't do it to get people to waste not, want not kind of thing. Like,
I think a lot of it could be the amount of stuff that gets, my wife, right? So growing up, my dad thought it was important I understand where food came from. Right. So, he grew up, he was a 4-H guy, right? He grew up tending to people's farms. He was not a farm kid. Right. He was a farm hand, right? And so every morning he would go tend the farm for people who do the work that you do on a farm. And so it was very important for him, to him, it was very important for me to know where my food came from. So I have slaughtered animals. I have watched animals be. I have grown animals and then slaughtered them. I have raised farms. I have done all the things that you do to generate the kind of food that you eat on a day-to-day basis. So I place a probably inordinate amount of value compared to most people on what it means if you're eating a chicken. Right? I know what it takes to raise a chicken, birth a chicken, raise a chicken, kill a chicken, clean a chicken, eat a chicken, right? And it's a lot. It's a lot. And I think that when you appreciate that and when you do that, you tend not to throw it in the trash.
Right.
Right. You tend to value the
You want to make it work. Last.
You want to make it work. It was a life that was sacrificed for your benefit, whether you see animals as, below you or not. It was a life that was extinguished so you could enjoy it. I enjoy meat. I am not anti-meat. Yeah. I eat meat. I'm just saying, use it. Don't throw away don't go buy 6 pounds when you could do with 1 and some veggies.
Yeah.
Right. I do think waste not, want not could be a big impact. I really do.
And because I say that because, I think I told you this before. I have a relative that they don't eat beef. And they aren't against people eating beef around them, but they don't eat beef as a personal choice because of the cattle, how cattle are taken care of, and yada, 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 which I do agree. If you drive through Northern California and you go through the cattle ranches in Northern California, you 100% see it. There's thousands of cows shoved into very small areas, which is another reason why I love this state. It doesn't happen as often. Most of the times you come across a cattle ranch in Texas, they've got 1,000 acres, and you'll see 1 or 2 cows, and then off in the distance 1 or 2 cows, and then off in the distance. And because they've got all this land, they're not trying to maximize their cattle in that area. So it's not
a factory.
Correct. So I could totally understand that, and I think that's where, again, maybe the human hubris and greed gets in place because we want to do the most with the least, right? So you end up in inhumane situations.
And the ones that need to do it the most are back to fast food, right? They're making the least profit margin on the product that they're providing to the public because they have to price it so low. If you're at a restaurant and you're going to pay $150 for a steak, there's a lot more room in there for them to say, no, I'm willing to pay more for the cow to have a better life.
Right.
Right. So, I definitely think some friends of mine, they actually buy whole cows. And what I mean by that is actually buy and raise a cow. And then they have that cow slaughtered, and that's their meat. And that cow lives a great life, and the kids, not mine, theirs, because mine don't know the cow, but the cow has a name. Those kids feed it every day, and they cry when it dies, and they love eating the burgers, right? So that's kind of the circle of life for them. And there's something to be said for people being that close. This is something else we cover on the podcast quite a bit. People being that close to the food that they're going to eat. Whether it's we're talking about protein, but it's the same thing with veggies, right? It's the same thing with appreciating the farmland and what it took to get a strawberry to your table. You know how hard it is to grow and ship a fresh strawberry? It's mind-blowingly difficult. The fact that you have a strawberry on your table, that is a modern miracle, right? And that applies to a lot of our stuff. So supporting local farms, actually doing that instead of buying big commercialized brands, all those things could help. And I think people should take those things seriously. I know you talk about farm to table quite a bit. So
and I try as best I can to buy local. I mean, that's going to be the best for me, and it's going to be the best for the farm. So, I mean, it's definitely something I want to do. I don't think people recognize how much, especially if you live inside of urban areas, if you live inside a city, how much goes in and comes out, and how much of that is waste. And it's kind of ridiculous if you do a little bit of a dive into that specifically, because I remember I read somewhere it's like if let's say society fell today, if I remember correctly, everyone that lives inside a city, so inside of city limits, would be dead within 30 days. Everyone, because literally it's every city is like Hawaii, like everything has to be shipped in and shipped out to get it out of there, everything. And so the idea that, like I said, I think that is more of a problem than the impact of agriculture on the the world. I think it's our waste. Like, we just waste too much.
Oh, sure. We just throw stuff away, yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, Rita actually said it's a good point. Rita said in YouTube chat, a local steak has less footprint than an avocado that has flown across the ocean. And
100%.
that's probably the perfect way to end that segment, because that is just true. A local steak has less footprint than an avocado that is flown
and it tastes
across
better.
the ocean. It does. You're not starving an hour later.
No.
Yeah. The steak toast doesn't work as well. Okay, so Hapa. And all the millennials cried out at once.
Those two guys are a bunch of meat-eating freaking conservatives.
I like avocado toast. Don't at me.
Right.
So Hapa. Man, we got it. We got about 29 minutes left. That's probably about perfect for this last couple of segments. Yeah. But what you watching?
I've been going hardcore into old episodes of a series I watched back in the day called In the Mind of a Chef. If you have not heard of this show, In the Mind of a Chef, it was a TV series that was narrated by Anthony Bourdain. You all know I'm still a fanboy today of that man. And what it literally did is every season was episode after episode after episode of one chef. So like Sean Brock was a chef that they followed for an entire season, and then after that was David Chang, and then so on and so forth. And what it was the trip that a chef took down the line of what their thought process is when they created menu items, or they created a restaurant, or they have you heard of Sean Brock before?
Nope.
So from the South, if you haven't heard of Sean Brock, I highly suggest you go and you look up Sean Brock. Sean Brock he's more of an Appalachia guy, but he goes all the way into the Deep South with a lot of his foods. And what he does specifically is, as much as possible, with heirloom everything. Heirloom vegetables, heirloom seeds, heirloom way of cooking, great-grandmother's cooking. Heirloom is, so first of all, if you get like heirloom vegetables, case in point, that's not something you're probably going to find in your local grocery store 9 times out of 10. That is the original, like the specimen A of a tomato or whatever. Yeah. So, and he has this project where people literally send him heirloom seeds of vegetables and stuff that may not even be grown anymore. And he'll grow them, and then he'll eat them, and he'll figure out menu items. And then he's got one restaurant, in, I think, either Louisville or Nashville. I can't remember, but that's his restaurant. That's kind of a higher end eating. And then he's got 2 more restaurants in the Carolinas, and they do everything is locally grown. So like they literally have vegetables and stuff they grow out back, and that's what they pick from, and then locally sourced meats and stuff like that. But anyway, In the Mind of a Chef, that's what they do. And a lot of the recipes that they cook, it's stuff that you could actually do at home. Like, you don't need a 5-star kitchen in order to do a lot of these recipes, because a lot of it is just food from the heart, and that's all it boils down to. And if you've ever watched No Reservations or Parts Unknown, or any of the shows that Anthony Bourdain had when he was still alive doing series, almost all of the chefs follow that same mentality. They kind of go down memory lane, because that's typically what drives people to do chef work, is maybe my grandma cooked this way or whatever. I want to learn how to do it and stuff like that. Amazing show. It really breaks into the psychology behind cooking, and the idea that chefs often cook out of love, and how to enjoy food and enjoy life, etc., etc. It's a great series. It's free. Matter of fact, it's on YouTube. You can look it up, In the Mind of a Chef, or you could probably look at it on Netflix as well. But it was a PBS series, so it's free out there. But fantastic. Seriously, it really is worth a watch. So if you're a food nerd like me, I mean.
Well, and I knew of Sean Brock through the seeds, right, and doing the work to have new types of grits, right, from a type of corn that, right. Those are the kind of things that I knew of Sean Brock from. So, and anything Anthony Bourdain did is just to me is on point. He
Yeah.
had great wit, well spoken, pointed, right?
Yep.
Kind of unapologetic, and just had a really good way to deliver some of those things.
Yeah, I did.
So yeah, that sounds fun.
Worth it.
That sounds fun. Yep. So
what you listening to?
So what I'm listening to, we don't have enough time for me to geek out on this, but I'm gonna. And you're stuck having to listen to me, right?
Hey man, I'm here for it.
So one of my favorite albums of all time, and I contend one of the greatest albums humans may ever hear, is Random Access Memories from Daft Punk.
Oh man.
And there's a reason, right? So I want to give the story before I tell you what I've been listening to. So Daft Punk got pretty well known, right? Electronic, a couple of French guys. They wear robot heads and do electronic music. I'm not an electronic music fan. So just full disclosure, that is not, I enjoy it from time to time. I do not go deep into the house scene or anything, any of the things that are there. But Daft Punk got a little bit popular, got a little bit of money, and they decided to do an homage to disco.
Oh.
Disco, the dance music from late 70s, early 80s.
Sure.
So Random Access Memories is an homage to disco. Now, Here's what's special about that album. A lot of people would know the music from that album. A lot of the songs on that album were very, very popular. They were played in a lot of places. But it was special because it was two electronic musicians who flew all over the world and found musicians to play that music. That music is actually played. So when you listen to Random Access Memories, that is a bass guitar being played. That is a guitar being played. That is a person playing the drums. That is a person playing the keyboards.
Sure.
It was not done on a really concise, really precise MIDI track, which is the way most electronic musicians do electronic music, which is why it has a sound. So one of the things about electronic music is it's perfect, right? And one of the things musicians will tell you is music is made in imperfection, right? Not in perfection. And so the real thing is the human struggle to try to be perfect to play music leads to you being close to perfection, but in fact imperfect. And humans, that resonates with other humans because it's a human doing a thing and you're connected there. So having said all of that, it was really interesting. Daft Punk did this thing. They met all these musicians and they realized in this process, holy crap, we're not musicians, right? It really led to a bit of an existential crisis. If you read some of the interviews with them, that they were like, these people are amazing. Now, what I think they may have, with some of the interviews I have read, I think what they may have missed is, yes, you got one of the best bass players to ever pick up a bass guitar to play that bass line for your song. You did. And yes, that is probably a better musician than you will ever be.
Right.
That's a better musician than maybe anyone will ever be. But that person does not have the vision you have to put together the whole picture.
Sure.
And so immediately after Random Access Memories, Disney hired them. They went and did the Tron soundtrack. And they did that with the Disney Orchestra, which I think just compounded the issue.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh my God, now there's a room full of these lunatics who are, able to do all these amazing things with music. And then they quit. So then they quit.
They legitimately did.
Quit.
Yeah.
They did. Yeah, they quit. They said, we can't do it anymore. And in a pretty spectacular style as well. So the reason I'm bringing all this up is 2 Fridays ago. So the Friday before Thanksgiving, 2 Fridays ago, Daft Punk re-released Random Access Memories. But they re-released it with no drum tracks. Oh. So for the first time, you can go listen to that entire album, top to bottom, start to finish, and there's not a drum on it. You can actually hear the bass guitar. You can actually hear the pick on a guitar. You can actually hear the keyboards. You can actually hear backing tracks that are a violin way back in the distance that they had someone play. And it is one of the more fascinating listens. If you get a chance to listen to it, I highly recommend it. Still great music, right? It's not boring because there's no drums. Yeah. But the humanity brought to electronic music is one of the coolest things. And I think, to me, that album in particular will stand the test of time. There's not a lot that have come out in the last 5 years, 10 years maybe, that I would say, oh, that's a keeper forever. It's not a Pet Sounds, right? It's not Pet Sounds from the Beach Boys. It's not a White Album from the Beatles, right? It's not Rumors, right? It's not these albums. But I would say that Random Access Memories is, and I was delighted. Album came out, I put it on my weekly list. Was like, I don't know, let me check that out, and I just can't get enough of it. Cannot get enough of it.
I'll have to give it a listen. I'm interested now.
Yep. It's really, really fascinating. You should take a listen. And if you do, I want you to message me and be like, oh, I didn't realize, because it's really easy to take those songs at face value, and that's what they're made for. They're pop songs.
Yeah, I mean, right? A lot of that music too. There's so many layers. You don't even know what's in there. Like it's just 100%. Melded together.
You know you like it, right?
Yeah,
you know you like it.
Yeah.
And that's what it's for. That's what it's meant to be. You know, no one is supposed to sit and just like really. It's not to be dug into, right? It's not Dragon Force, right? It's like, it's not meant to be scrutinized. It's meant to be enjoyed.
Right.
But the artistry of that particular album is mind blowing when you get to sit back and realize that a human being had to make electronic music. You know how hard that is. It's really hard to do.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I've been listening to. So now you had to hear me geek out about it. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
To be honest with you, I think the last few podcasts you've suggested various albums that I've ended up going, and I do as I always do. I just pull one or two songs that I like, but they end up sticking, and they're in there. You know, like there's a lot of Greta Van Fleet in my playlist now. Like I keep finding more and more and more. Case in point,
once you start with those kids, you can't. Get
oh
away
man,
from them.
The fantastic voice, man! I tell you.
Yep. Oh my god, it's just unbelievable. So let's talk half of the next. We got about 18 minutes left. The next segment is going to be fun, I think. So what you been playing?
So, should we talk about first of all the game that you quit? let me. For those of you listening out there, I've known Seven for
none of this is true.
Going on?
Whatever he's about to say is not true.
I think we're going on 2 years now. I think something like that. I've known you.
Oh yeah,
maybe a little longer. Anyway, I have never seen Seven pick up and or put down a game so quickly back to back before as he did War Thunder.
Yeah.
I've been playing the heck out of War Thunder.
You have, and I had picked up War Thunder a couple years ago. And I tried it. I tried the tanks side of it. I tried the, I guess the coastal ships, right?
Yeah.
Not the blue water fleets or whatever. Yeah. So I tried those, and honestly, it just didn't stick. I felt like I didn't understand it. And I didn't understand it because you get one shot a lot in that game, and you don't have any real learning feedback a lot of times. It's like I don't know what I did wrong, right? And I ended up, I'm dead. Okay, well, I guess I'll go do something else for a while. And that's kind of how the game went the first time. But more recently, you'd been playing it, you'd been streaming it a bit, and I got to be honest, looks like a whole lot of fun. I really like a lot of the concepts there, especially the tanks part of it. And I hopped in with you and our buddy Deacon, and we played a bit, and I rage quitted. Yes, I did. I did indeed. And I think there's a real correlation happen between a game I want to like and how hard it fights me. Right? So like I
totally.
Really, right? I don't care if I like Stardew Valley. I'm not like passionate about wanting to love Stardew Valley, right? So it doesn't have to be perfect. But if I want to like a game, like I really want to like it, and it tries not to let me, it's like a relationship turned sour. Like
it's very frustrating to the point of being enraging. So I've had people in my streams, they've asked me for advice and stuff like that, and what do you think of it? And I usually tell people if you play the realistic side of the house of any of their various combat things, from tanks to aircraft to navy, whatever, it has the highest skill gap, the highest ceiling of any game in that genre, and I don't care what anybody says, in that genre for the realistic side. The skill cap is so high because there's no, like you said, there's no feedback to tell you what you did wrong. 9 times out of 10, you don't even know how whatever just happened.
Yep.
And you don't know how to counter
it.
Yep. It's not friendly to new people at all, and I think that is a huge downside.
Not friendly. I agree. It's not friendly to new people. You want me to tell you? I thought about it a little bit. I was being funny on your stream the other day, and I was being salty about it, but I'm not actually salty right now. But I thought about it a bit, and the reality is money is not my primary deciding factor on
Sure.
playing a game, right? And for a lot of people it is, and I know I'm saying that from a place of privilege. I get it. I have more money than I have time, right? That's not saying I have a lot of money. I just have very little time.
Yeah.
Right. So when I look at a game, I'm going to play a game that's new and it's a game as not expensive, as expansive, it's huge as something like, War Thunder. I look at it and I'm like, I want to get into that game.
Yeah.
I want to get into the game. I want to be part of the ecosystem of the game, because it's more than just like, oh, I played a game for a few minutes, right? It's not you become part of like an ecosystem, and you invest hours and hours and hours and potentially lots of money in it. And I think in the case of War Thunder, where I'm not going to begrudge any company for trying to monetize the thing they create. I want them to make money. That's how they get to continue making great products. I think in the case of War Thunder, however, where it fell apart for me is it didn't get me hooked before it tried to make me pay.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? It fought me too early. In other words, I didn't get to have an experience of just like euphoric, oh my God, the honeymoon phase.
Right.
I get to enjoy like the full version of something for fun. And then, if you want to keep enjoying it after, 60 hours of gameplay, you're going to have to start paying some money. I would have probably been dead hooked on something like that. Yeah. But when I think I was 12 hours in when I rage quit, right? Which
I think the error that we had with you playing is we went to realistic battles early, like way too early. And I think you need to play arcade for quite a while. So you kind of, I think so, because it does a few things. It teaches you the maps. You learn the maps a little easier. Every single enemy has a marker over their head.
The maps, dude.
Yeah. Well, and that's a huge thing, right? Because you have to use a certain level of strategery, and you can't do that if you don't know where you're going. But I personally think that was probably one of the bigger problems with you, is we took you into realistic right away, which
I liked the realistic part of it. I like the fact that it's like, no, we're going to hold down an area. I like that stuff. I dig that.
And
stuff.
that's why one reason why I originally thought you would be happy with War Thunder is because you're a very strategic mindset that way. And I think that's
well, to be fair, I enjoyed all of that. It's the gap of, I just shot that guy 7 times before he turned around.
Yeah. He was ignoring me, actually, and then he got annoyed and he turned around and one-shot me.
Oh, I just spent 14 minutes sneaking around behind a guy to shoot him 7 times before he could get his stupid turret turned around.
Yeah.
But the moment that turret turned around, I exploded.
I was dead. Yep. Yeah. No, that's. I'm there with you. That frustration, I completely understand.
I will tell you, watching you stream it, I think it was yesterday. I was watching you stream it, and you were having the same issues, and I was like, yeah, the game just works that way.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. As I was trying, I try to tell everybody, like, it's the same way with another game I play, which is called Hell Let Loose. Like, you're going to die. You'll die repeatedly.
Sure.
Just die. You have no idea where the shots are coming from. You have no idea what you did wrong. But all you do is you hop back in and you do it again, and you keep trying. As over time, I don't even know how many hours I have in the game, but I've gotten to a point now where I'm very comfortable with where I'm going, how I'm positioning. But then, there's days like today, like this morning.
With War Thunder? Or
with War Thunder,
War Thunder, yeah.
There's days today, like Deacon and I this morning were playing, and I was like, okay, well, that's enough War Thunder for the day, because I got bombed out of Oblivion repeatedly as I spawned in. Like,
the airplanes. Gotta have airplanes.
That's the solution to everything.
I will say that as a newbie coming into War Thunder, I think you just made it was an interesting point to be made, right? Because I come into War Thunder, I'm good at video games, right? I'm not bad at video games. I've been playing them for a long time.
Yeah.
And I have an expectation for myself that within a certain amount of hours, I kind of understand the mechanics of how a game works, right? Like, it doesn't take me 3 weeks to learn the core mechanics of the game.
Yeah.
And so in the case of War Thunder, right, there is really nothing preparing you that says you're gonna just die, because there are tanks you can't hurt who can hurt you. There's nothing that says that. So you pile that against like getting blasted by some light tank, which shouldn't, right? You should have done something different. You should have improved, and you could have won that fight.
Yeah.
Versus, there's no difference to fighting some heavy tank that you can't, that's a full battle rating above you, but you can't do anything to. And so as a newbie, you're just like, everything feels like I'm getting dumped on. And then when you're sitting in the spawn and airplanes are actually dumping on you.
Yeah. You haven't even moved it.
So,
you're like, okay,
right.
I'm in my tank, and oh, look, I'm dead.
Oh, you're in your AA truck, and it's like,
yeah,
I'm in an AA truck. I'm going to kill the airplanes. Airplane killed you. Wait.
By the way, anti-aircraft is AA. Oh, look, it's anti-aircraft AA.
Yeah, it's anti-aircraft, Yeah. So it's a fun game. I may pick it back up at some point and try to play it offline on arcade, see if it helps. But it is a game I want to like, and it is a game I rage quit and uninstalled. I've never done that before. Full disclosure.
That was pretty legit. Like the night that we're playing, he's like, "Oh no, 7 strip. Oh no, I've already installed it.
It's gone. It's gone. I needed that disk space.
I was like, Jesus, that was quick.
I have reclaimed the disk space. All right, Happa. Well, you got 9 minutes until we're at 2 hours. That's probably more time than you need. But let's wrap it up with Happa's rules for good living.
So, I'm gonna have to. I've been slowly adding to my list of rules. Happa's life rules. I started this. Everybody has hard times in their life, and I'm no different. And throughout my life, I've learned just as I've gotten older, there's things I need to do in my life or say to myself in my life to just get through life. And I've ended up, throughout my life with a lot of folks that, have called me and vented to me and stuff like that. And I oftentimes tell them these rules so that they kind of understand why I'm the way I am. And maybe it'll help them in the long run. And I think we're on our fourth podcast, maybe 5th that I've read these. So we're at rule number 40 to 50. But rule number 40 is don't hand out love lightly. I mean, that's typically one that I tell my younger friends because it's a thing that happens quite often, I think, for them. 41 is don't hate. I think that's a rule that my mom instilled in me years and years and years ago. She's like, you can dislike something, you can not care for something, you cannot hate something or hate someone. Don't hate. Like, shouldn't be something that's in your vernacular. And I've kind of tried, except for the guy that said, say please.
Say please.
I hate that guy.
It's an inside joke. Sorry, we'll tell you that someday, guys. 42 is nothing in life is worthwhile unless you take risks. I used to try to tell people, be comfortable being uncomfortable. I used to tell a lot of the leaders coming up in the Navy, like, be comfortable being uncomfortable, because if you're being uncomfortable, you're probably doing it right. You're learning and you're performing, which is what you want. 43 is there's no passion to be this is a Nelson Mandela quote, by the way. This is not me, but there's no passion to be found playing small and settling for a life that is less than what you are capable of living. So I mean, that's right along the lines with, don't ever let anybody tell you can't do something. Like, that's just silly. If you want to do something, go do it. Be consistent. Without consistency, you will never finish whatever it is you're doing. And that isn't a truth. I don't know what is. Don't be afraid to fail. Thomas Edison conducted 100 failed experiments because 1,000 failed experiments because 1,001 was the light bulb. I mean, that's, you have to keep going. And along the lines with that, you may hear a lot of military leaders say this, fall down 7 times, get up 8. I mean, that's kind of how you should live your life. Dreams without goals are just dreams. I mean, that definitely is true. Like, everybody's got dreams, but you should probably set your goals in alignment with those dreams, hopefully, and achieve those goals, right? Always do the right thing, even when it's popular, and even when it's not popular, and even when no one is looking. That's a mantra that's kind of always been in my head when I was a leader as well. Like, my sailors used to laugh at me because I'd be walking down P-ways picking up trash. Like, they'd walk behind me and see me picking up trash. Like, what are you doing, Chief? There's trash on the ground. What are you talking about? Like, and then these 3, to me, are very important, especially when you aim them at folks that you love. Always be willing to say, I'm sorry. Always be willing to say, I'm wrong. Always be willing to say, I miss you. Like, those 3 things, when it comes to those people around you, I don't think are thoughts or time type processes that we allow to come out vocally enough towards each other. And I think that's pretty important. So, yeah, 10 more rules.
Love it, man. This is always one of my favorite parts. I love hearing those.
Yeah, man.
Good stuff.
The list is ever growing.
I think we're done, man.
No, we have to stretch it out another 10 minutes.
Gotta get that extra 5 minutes in. Well, in review,
look, let's go over everything one more time. No, to be clear, guys, like Seven and I, not gonna lie, we were supposed to do this on Tuesday. Seven was feeling under the weather. We put it off. It actually was a good thing because we are having problems getting subjects to talk about. Like it's getting really difficult. Not for trying. It's because, as you can imagine, news is all focused around a few things out there, and we try to avoid those few things. So if you're listening to this or if you're watching the podcast, definitely feel free to respond either on this YouTube video or send Seven or I a DM with topic suggestions. Again, we typically avoid politics, geopolitics, religion, all the things you probably shouldn't talk about at the Thanksgiving table is pretty much a good rule of thumb.
Which probably a lot of people learned last week.
Unfortunately, yeah. I had some conversations with friends. I guess their Thanksgivings were interesting.
Oh, so. I had a lot of conversations where people learned that particular lesson this past week. I've known that one for a while myself, but, some people
we have to learn it every time, I guess.
But some people still have to learn it, it appears.
But yeah, we definitely could use your guys' input, or if there's something you guys want us to expound on a little bit more, we're more than willing to go back prior episodes, certain episodes. Maybe you didn't think we talked about it enough, as long as it doesn't involve Elon Musk, because we talk about that man more probably than we did.
Hey, I was good. You did that.
I did in fact start the conversation with Seven this time. Yes,
you did that. You should see my notebook. It just says Elon Musk over and over and over and over again. Elon.
Red rub.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm gonna be good.
But yeah, we definitely could use some suggestions or ideas from you guys as well. I mean, it will help us out. Evidently, there's not a whole lot of news going on right now, which I find really hard to believe. But where can people reach you if they want to check out your content, Mr. Seven?
You can reach me at S3VYN just about anywhere. I've had that name for a long time. You can hit me up on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, Elon's megaphone. Hit me there. We should do that. I should register elonsmegaphone.com and just have it point to...
I feel like that would be a great freaking... Just feed all of his tweets and everything into that.
Yeah, just Elon's megaphone. So you can reach me on Twitter, X. At least for now, I haven't bailed on it completely yet. Trying to be a force of good in a sea of crazy sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
But also on Twitch. I'm over on Twitch. And that's not a bad way to reach me either. So yeah, that's probably the best ways to hit me up. What about you, Happa? How can people find the infamous Happa?
Same way, Happa_fodder. If you Google that, you pretty much find everything from my YouTube to my Twitch to my Twitter to my... I'll just keep calling it Twitter. I don't even care. Facebook and what have you. You'll probably find me, probably see an image. You can reach me there. As always, folks, we appreciate you guys. We appreciate everyone that follows our podcast and listens to it. I am blown away all the time by looking at the analytics and seeing what a global force this podcast is becoming, and we're coming for you, Joe. We're coming for you, Joe.
Global force. Yeah, we're still looking for some folks in Jamaica to request us to come down. You tell us where. I can get enough equipment in a suitcase. I promise you.
We'll make it work. I hope you guys are having a good... I know this season right now is... We didn't talk about it really, but I meant to bring up and ask if Seven wanted to talk about it. We'll probably talk about it again in the next podcast, but I know this time of year is rough for a lot of folks. Sincerely hope you guys are okay and you're being able to be around your family and friends and hopefully having a good time. If you aren't having a good time, definitely reach out to your friends, reach out to family. Conversate, have that hard conversation, man. Don't internalize it. That stuff is rough. You don't need to be doing that. And at the end of the day, we just all need to be better human to each other, especially this time of year, man. Be better to each other. Be good humans. Like, I don't know how else to put it, really, if I'm honest with you. But
and I'm not adding anything to that.
I think that rounds it off for us, though. Episode 11, Boulevardier.
It's in the can. And
yeah.
if you're watching this on YouTube, you can get this probably come Friday. It seems like end of day Fridays usually is when I'm able to find the time to go ahead and do the mixing and mastering and get everything out.
Yeah.
But if not Friday, it'll be Saturday. So we will get this thing published wherever you look for podcasts, whether that's Spotify, whether that's Apple, wherever you go for podcasts, you'll be able to find us there. Again, keep our eye on Twitter. Happa's Twitter is a great place to find out when we're going to be doing the live podcast if you want to watch. So go find Happa_fodder on Twitter/X. And yeah, come look us up. Come hang out. We love interacting with folks. We love hearing from you. Comment on the YouTube channel. And maybe we'll pick one of your subjects. In particular, Happa, we talked about doing some historical stuff. So if you have like a historical thing you'd love covered, I think it'd be fun to hear us two idiots talk about some historical event. The amount of inaccuracies and uneducated opinions we could throw into there is probably second to none.
Jeez, that's the perfect way to put it, I think, too. So anyway, until next time, hopefully in about 2 weeks we'll see y'all, and I hope you guys have a great night. Appreciate y'all.
Good night, everybody.